Imagine this, a packed theater somewhere in Hollywood. The kind of venue where history gets made. Chandeliers overhead, cameras flashing from every angle, an audience that includes studio heads, streaming executives, and fashion's most powerful voices, all gathered in the same room because they sense something important is about to happen. And standing in the center of all of it, in a gown that cost more than most people's annual salary, is a woman who less than a decade ago was just a teenage girl from Thailand with a dream too large for the city she was born in. The announcer calls her name, not her K-pop persona, not her group's name, just Lisa. And the room erupts. That image might sound like fantasy right now. But to anyone who has been watching the entertainment industry closely over the past 2 years, it doesn't just feel possible. It feels like the only logical conclusion to a story that has been building for years, one move at a time, one bold decision at a time. Because right now, Lalisa Manobal, the Thai-born superstar who conquered K-pop, stunned Paris, redefined what a Louis Vuitton ambassador looks like, and launched her own independent label, is standing at a crossroads that very few artists in history have ever reached. And the path she's about to take could change Hollywood forever. So here is the question that should be keeping entertainment executives up at night. What exactly is Lisa planning? And why does it have the entire industry watching her every single move? To understand why this moment matters, you first need to understand the specific, rare, almost alchemical combination of qualities that makes Lisa unlike any artist who has come before her. Lalisa Manobal, known to the world simply as Lisa, first emerged on the global stage as the main dancer and one of 4 members of BLACKPINK, the K-pop group that became the most subscribed music act on YouTube in the platform's history. Born in Buriram, Thailand, she auditioned for YG Entertainment as a teenager, outperformed thousands of other hopefuls in a brutally competitive industry, and spent years in intense training before making her debut. That origin story alone, a Thai artist breaking through in an industry historically dominated by Korean nationals, was already extraordinary. It said something about the force of her talent that no marketing campaign could manufacture. But BLACKPINK, as dominant as that chapter was, turned out to be just the beginning. When Lisa launched her solo career with Lalisa in 2021, the music video broke YouTube records within 24 hours of release. The single charted simultaneously across Asia, Europe, and North America. Critics noticed something unusual immediately. This did not feel like a standard idol side project designed to capitalize on a group's existing fame. It felt like an artist making a declaration of creative independence, musically, visually, and culturally. The scale was one thing. The intention behind it was something else entirely. Then came the moments that truly signaled a fundamental shift in trajectory. In late 2023, Lisa performed a residency at Crazy Horse Paris, one of the most celebrated and artistically uncompromising cabarets in the world. This was not a K-pop concert. It was not a fan event. It was a statement of artistic ambition, delivered in a space that has hosted the work of icons like Dita Von Teese. The global media coverage it generated was unlike anything a K-pop artist had produced in a context completely detached from pop music. The fashion world had already understood who Lisa was long before that. Louis Vuitton signed her as a global brand ambassador, placing her in a stratosphere of commercial credibility occupied by only the most bankable cultural figures on the planet. She has appeared on the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle across multiple countries in the same season. Fashion editors and luxury brand executives, people who do not attach their names to trends but to icons, were using a very specific word to describe her: irreplaceable. And then, in 2024, Lisa launched LLOUD, her own independent entertainment label. That move stopped many industry observers in their tracks. Because launching a label is not the action of an artist planning to stay inside a lane. You do not build independent infrastructure if your ambitions are modest. You do not hire the kind of executive talent LLOUD has been quietly bringing in if you are simply planning more music videos. LLOUD was a signal. The question was, a signal toward what? That question is precisely what we are here to answer. 1. The turning point. Here is what makes this moment categorically different from every previous chapter of Lisa's career. Every major move she has made, the solo debut, the Crazy Horse residency, the Louis Vuitton deal, the founding of LLOUD, the rockstar era that followed, has functioned as a building block. Individually, each one appeared radical. Viewed in sequence, they form a pattern that is almost impossibly deliberate. A strategic architecture aimed at something much larger than what any single project could contain. To understand what that larger thing is, you have to understand the context Lisa is stepping into. The entertainment industry is not the same industry it was 5 years ago. The traditional gatekeepers, the major studios, the legacy record labels, the powerful talent agencies that once controlled who got to cross from one world into another, are navigating a landscape that has been restructured beneath them at extraordinary speed. Streaming dismantled the old distribution model. Social media destroyed the idea that fame must be granted from behind a velvet rope. And a new generation of global consumers has made something painfully clear. They do not want content made exclusively for American audiences, by American creators, in the American cultural language. The world wants something genuinely plural. The industry, slowly and sometimes reluctantly, is beginning to listen. Now place Lisa precisely inside this context. She is, by almost any available metric, the most globally recognized individual Asian female artist alive right now. Her social media reach spans hundreds of millions of followers across platforms. Her music streams across demographics that rarely overlap with each other. She moves between cultural worlds, Thai, Korean, French, English, with an ease that cannot be manufactured, because for her, it has never been performance. It has simply been who she is. Industry analysts who study the inter of K-pop and Western entertainment have noted something consistently fascinating about Lisa's specific positioning. While other K-pop acts have attempted, with varying degrees of success, to enter Western markets primarily through music, Lisa's path has been structurally different. She has built credibility in spaces entirely detached from K-pop, high fashion, performance art, independent business ownership. She has pre-positioned herself, whether by design or by instinct, for a world beyond pop music. Which brings us to the center of everything we are building toward. Because what sources inside the entertainment industry have been quietly discussing for the better part of the past year is not another music release or another brand partnership. The move we are about to discuss is not just a role. It is a statement about who gets to be the face of global entertainment going forward, about whether Hollywood is genuinely ready to embrace a world it has long claimed to represent, and about what happens when an artist arrives not asking for permission but simply refusing to wait for an invitation. The full shape of that statement is just ahead. But to appreciate it properly, we need to understand exactly what the industry is doing right now, because the timing of Lisa's move is not accidental. 2. Industry Deep Dive. Let's talk about what is actually happening inside Hollywood right now, because without this context, the full weight of Lisa's next move is nearly impossible to measure. In 2019, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite did something that the industry considered, almost universally, to be beyond the realm of realistic possibility. It won the Academy Award for Best Picture, not in the foreign language category. The main category, the top prize, an entirely Korean language film, beat out every English language production that year. The response from Hollywood was loud, chaotic, and deeply revealing. Executives held emergency strategy sessions. Trade publications ran pieces with a variation of the same uncomfortable question, how did we miss this? The answer was that Hollywood had been operating for decades on a flawed assumption, that global audiences primarily wanted to consume American content, and that Asian artists and non-English language projects were inherently niche. Parasite did not just win an award. It demolished that assumption with measurable, undeniable, box office-sized evidence. Then came 2022, and Everything Everywhere, All at Once. A chaotic, deeply human film built around Michelle Yeoh, a Malaysian-born actress who had spent decades delivering extraordinary performances in Asian cinema before Hollywood gave her a platform proportional to her talent, swept the Oscars with 6 wins. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Original Screenplay. The message was unmistakable, and the industry received it. The streaming platforms absorbed the signal faster than anyone. Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and Apple TV Plus are all engaged in what industry analysts consistently describe as a global content arms race. And their strategies now reflect a fundamental rethinking of what global actually means. Netflix has invested billions in Korean content specifically, and those investments have produced some of the platform's most watched series in its history. Squid Game is the most visible example, but it is only one data point in a pattern that has repeated itself reliably. But here is a crucial distinction. Almost everything that has crossed over so successfully from Korean content to Western audiences, Squid Game, Crash Landing on You, All of Us Are Dead, has done so on the strength of the content itself. The artists involved were largely unknown to Western audiences before they landed on the platform. The crossover was about the storytelling finding its audience. What has not happened yet, what no streaming platform, no major studio, no Hollywood production has yet executed at the highest level, is a project built specifically around a K-pop artist of Lisa's magnitude. An artist who already commands a Western fan base, who already possesses Western cultural credibility, who already moves between Eastern and Western creative contexts fluently, not as a visitor, but as a permanent resident of both. That distinction carries enormous weight from a pure business standpoint. Studios spend extraordinary resources attempting to build stars, developing them through years of projects, investing in marketing campaigns designed to convince audiences to care. Lisa arrives pre-built, with an audience that has already demonstrated, repeatedly, across multiple languages, across multiple industries, that it will follow her across cultural boundaries. From a purely financial perspective, attaching her name and her creative vision to a major project is not just an artistic opportunity. It is, as multiple entertainment finance analysts have noted in recent trade coverage, a risk reduction strategy of significant order. Industry veterans have pointed to compounding precedents. When BLACKPINK's concert documentary became one of Netflix's most-watched music events, the viewership data told a story that studio executives took seriously. When individual BLACKPINK members began attracting brand deals that rivaled, and in some cases exceeded, the commercial value of their Western counterparts, the licensing and endorsement industry took note. Each data point added weight to the same emerging conclusion: this audience is real, it is large, it is commercially potent, and it has not yet been given a project worthy of its size. Lisa, with her own label, her own creative infrastructure, and a trajectory that appears to have been building toward exactly this moment, is positioned at the convergence of all of it. The perfect storm has been forming for years. We are right now standing directly in its eye. 3. The revelation. So, what is the move? Multiple sources within the entertainment industry, individuals familiar with conversations at the highest levels of major streaming and studio development, have indicated that what is taking shape around Lisa is not a one-off collaboration, not a cameo designed for social media headlines, not a guest verse on a Western artist's track. What industry insiders suggest is being actively shaped is something considerably more ambitious, a signature entertainment vehicle conceived from the ground up around Lisa's specific, irreplicable crossover positioning. Here is what we know for certain. In the past 18 months, LLOUD has expanded its operational structure in ways that speak clearly to intention. The company has brought in creative talent with backgrounds not in K-pop management, but specifically in Western film and television development. That is not a coincidence, and it is not an accident of hiring. You do not build that kind of internal expertise unless you are planning to use it. Sources close to the project indicate that conversations have been ongoing with major streaming platforms about a vehicle that would position Lisa not as a supporting presence in someone else's story, not in the diminished decorative role that Hollywood has too often assigned to Asian women, but as the central creative force, a lead, an executive producer, a co-architect of the entire creative direction, from concept through final cut. The shape of what is being developed, according to industry analysis and reporting from entertainment trade circles, fits into a category that streaming platforms have been quietly identifying as the next major frontier in premium content, the music-driven cinematic project. Not a traditional film, not a concert documentary, something more immersive, a narrative experience that lives at the inter of music, visual world building, and the kind of storytelling architecture that streaming audiences have demonstrated they will engage with deeply when it is executed at the highest level. The precedents are instructive. Beyoncé's Renaissance concert film proved that music acts could own cinema as a medium when they approached it entirely on their own terms. Taylor Swift's Eras Tour film generated hundreds of millions of dollars at the global box office through an unconventional distribution strategy that bypassed traditional studio channels. The market exists. The appetite is proven. But here is what neither of those projects did, what no project of that scale has yet done. Neither crossed the specific cultural boundary that Lisa's potential move represents. Both arrived for audiences who already shared a cultural framework with the artist. Lisa's project, as described by those with knowledge of its early development, would be conceived from its foundation in the genuinely global creative language that Lisa herself embodies, not as a product made in one culture for export to another, but as something that belongs simultaneously to multiple worlds. Industry observers who specialize in Asian entertainment crossovers have settled on a specific word to describe what this represents: precedent setting. Not just for Lisa's career, not just for K-pop as a genre, but for the entire structural framework through which the Western entertainment industry has historically understood and undervalued Asian talent. What we know for certain is that the infrastructure exists, the timing has never been more favorable, and the industry is watching with a combination of genuine excitement and barely concealed anxiety. Because if this works, and there are compelling, data-supported reasons to believe it will, the entertainment landscape on the other side of it will look meaningfully different from the one we have now. 4. The ripple effect. Let's think beyond the project itself, because the true significance of what Lisa is positioned to do is not contained in any single title, any streaming platform, or any opening weekend number. It is in the template this moment creates, and the doors it forces permanently open. For decades, the path for Asian artists seeking genuine recognition in Western entertainment has run through essentially the same narrow corridor. Adapt your sound to fit what American radio already plays. Soften or obscure the elements of your cultural identity that Western audiences might find unfamiliar. Wait to be discovered and elevated by a Western cosign. Accept the terms offered, because the alternative is to accept no terms at all. That has been the corridor. And the fact that it requires artists to diminish themselves as a precondition for entry has been something the industry acknowledged only when external pressure made denial impossible. Lisa never entered that corridor. She built a global audience without shrinking her identity to fit it. She entered the highest levels of Western fashion without pretending to be something other than what she was. She performed at Crazy Horse Paris not because a Western institution invited her to, but because she chose to go there, on her terms, with her own creative vision. And now, if she executes this next move through the infrastructure her own label has built, she will have done something that sounds simple but has historically been extraordinarily difficult. She will have entered Hollywood as a creative equal. The template that creates, for the generation of Asian artists currently watching, is the thing that matters most in the long term. Because it answers a question that too many talented artists have been afraid to ask out loud. Is it possible to arrive in Western entertainment not as a novelty, not as a cultural curiosity, but as a fully formed creative force whose terms are respected from the beginning? If Lisa's move delivers what the evidence suggests it is capable of delivering, the answer will be documented, quantified, and impossible to argue with. The business model implications run equally deep. Entertainment companies have traditionally controlled the crossover process. They decide which artists from outside the American mainstream receive an opportunity, on what terms, with what creative restrictions attached as a condition of access. LLOUD structure represents a direct challenge to that control. An Asian artist, operating through her own company, negotiating directly with the world's largest content platforms without a major label sitting at the table extracting leverage. That is new. And every negotiation that follows, for every Asian artist who comes after Lisa, will happen in the shadow of whatever precedent this one sets. Then there is the fan dimension, arguably the most powerful dimension of all, and the one Hollywood is least equipped to understand using its existing models. What made Lisa's scale of platform possible was not a marketing campaign designed by a studio. It was a global community of fans who cross every cultural, linguistic, and geographic boundary imaginable. Blinks, the name for BLACKPINK's fanbase, are studied within the entertainment industry for the intensity, coordination, and commercial impact of their collective engagement. They stream, they trend, they mobilize, they purchase, they advocate. And they do all of this simultaneously across Asia, Europe, North America, South America, and the Middle East. They are not a demographic. They are a phenomenon. Hollywood has never had to reckon with a fandom of that scale and sophistication attached to a crossover project of this ambition. Studios traditionally estimate audience size through domestic and international projection models built on familiar demographic assumptions. Lisa's project will require entirely different models because the audience she brings was never captured by those assumptions in the first place. Consider what that means for how studios calculate risk and reward going forward. If Lisa's project delivers, and the pre-existing audience size alone makes significant commercial results highly probable, the industry will have irrefutable, balance sheet-level proof of something it has been slowly and reluctantly absorbing since Parasite walked onto that Oscar stage. Global audiences, given content that treats them as fully present, will show up. They will show up in numbers that cannot be explained by any framework built exclusively around American cultural assumptions. And the conversation inside Hollywood will shift permanently from how do we bring Asian artists into our system to a more honest and more interesting question, how do we build systems worthy of the audiences Asian artists already lead? That is the real revolution embedded in this moment, not a career pivot, not a crossover project, A restructuring of who holds creative power in global entertainment, and on whose terms that power gets exercised going forward. Return to that image we started with. A packed theater, cameras flashing, a woman standing at the center of a moment the entire entertainment industry is watching. That image is not a fantasy. It is not wishful thinking from a devoted fan base. It is a trajectory, and every strategic decision, every creative statement, every piece of infrastructure Lisa has built over the past several years points toward it with a precision that is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. What this moment represents, beyond the career mathematics, beyond the business implications, beyond even the historic significance for Asian representation in Western media, is something more elemental. It represents the moment when the entertainment world stops pretending that global is simply a synonym for American distributed elsewhere and begins understanding it as something genuinely plural. Something that cannot be contained in a single language, a single cultural framework, or the studio lots of a single city. Lisa did not petition for this. She did not wait for the industry to evolve into readiness and then ask permission to enter. She built the infrastructure. She cultivated the audience. She made herself impossible to ignore. Not by conforming to the shape the industry expected, but by arriving as the most fully realized version of herself across every medium she has entered. The entertainment industry does not change when studios decide in a boardroom that it should. It changes when someone too talented, too strategic, and too culturally significant to sideline simply walks through a door and refuses to close it behind them. Lisa appears to be standing at that door right now. And here is the question I genuinely want your perspective on. Because the comments on videos like this one tend to produce conversations worth having. If Lisa's crossover project succeeds on the terms being built around it, who do you think comes next? Which K-pop or Asian artist has the specific profile, the platform, the cultural positioning, the creative infrastructure to follow the path she's about to open? And what would their version of this moment look like? Drop your answer below. The conversation down there is worth reading, and I read more of it than you might assume. If you want to go deeper on this story and there is significantly more depth to explore, the next video in this series examines the broader K-pop to Hollywood pipeline in detail, which management agencies are currently building crossover infrastructure, which projects are in active early development at major platforms, and why the window between now and 2027 may represent the most transformative period in the history of global entertainment. That one is coming soon, and you will not want to miss it.